Welcome back to Reddit Aliens, everyone. Hello again, I'm John, and today we're taking a look at a very serious subject matter, so be forewarned. What's the darkest secret anyone's ever told you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I have droopy eyes and a learning disability due to head trauma I sustained as a child, but I never knew it happened. I was drinking with my older stepbrother, and he broke down crying, telling me he's sorry for hitting me and causing all those issues. Apparently, when he was 15, he decided to strike me in the head, and I wasn't the same after. I can't tell you how much it hurts knowing this. When I was in treatment at Belmont Hospital, I had a guy come over to me and sit next to me, only for him to tell me he was raped when he was a child, and that he was going to tell his mom for the first time that day. He just kept asking me, how am I going to tell her without making her think it's her fault? Heartbreaking. My older sister admitted to me that when she was a teenager, she went to the back streets, an area full of warehouses, with our dad's gun and thought about killing herself. My sister and I are 5 years apart. We didn't become close until I was about 13. She admitted this to me when I was about 14 or 15. I don't know if she remembers confiding in me about that detail, but I'm grateful she thought about her family members. I can't imagine growing up without her. I suppose it wasn't a secret. I just didn't know about it for a long time. My little sister was molested by our babysitter's husband when she was 4 and I was 6. She told me when we were in our mid-30s. It triggered a memory, walking around the house looking for her, and finally walking into the garage where she was there with him. He shouted at me to get out, which I did. I didn't see what was going on. She was being forced to give him a blowjob, or I didn't process it. It also triggered another memory. His older daughter, 12ish I think, undressing for the boys in the playhouse in the backyard. At the time, I thought it was really weird, and now I know it was due to trauma. I tried to get my sister to do something about it, but she didn't want to, and the statute of limitations was long expired. Tried telling her that she maybe could save some other kid. She's dead now. Drank herself to death in her early 40s. That someone I knew ran someone over with a car a few years ago. He couldn't help it. It was raining, and an elderly woman dressed dark suddenly stepped out between parked cars. He had no chance to react in time. The dark part being that when the police came to inspect the case, they told him not to worry, because they would take care that he didn't get into trouble, because the old lady was just a foreigner. They reported that his car was in perfect condition, his wipers brand new, anything to deflect any fault at all from him. My friend came to school and told me something like this one day in 4th grade. Dude, I just ran into this old lady's mailbox in front of her house with my big-ass bike on the way to school. She was sitting out front with her wheelchair, so I got the hell out of there. Anyways, she wheeled herself down to see the damage, lost control on the steep pavement to the road and got hit by a car. He said he had never biked so fast before. We're pretty sure she died. God may rest her soul. I feel like this could be some type of criminal activity that should be reported. I don't know. What do you guys think? My buddy killed 2 people trying to rob him with a rock in Brazil while on vacation. He came back with bad scratches and cuts, but he never told the authorities in fear that they'd arrest him or flip the story because he's a foreigner. I had a conversation with my mom after she downed a bottle of pills. She was out of it and was 100% honest. I was never planned for, wanted, or loved. I was an immediate regret. I knew this already, but it was nice to hear it out loud. I didn't call 911 or anything, just let the cards fall where they may. My mom went right back to gaslighting me and doesn't remember the conversation. She's confused why I moved 300 miles away and only talk to her twice a year. I've had a few people confide in me they were molested or raped. My friend, when I was 12, started seeing a 40-plus-year-old she met on Yahoo Chat. I told my parents told her parents, he was arrested, trial happened, very graphic details came out about his multiple 10 to 13-year-old victims. He was sent to prison for 10 years. She was in love, and has hated me since. I tried to reconnect with her, thinking that we're in our 30s, she'd want to maybe talk. She immediately blocked me on all social media. My husband told me he was raped multiple times as a young boy by an adult neighbor. He never told anyone except me. The neighbor died a few years before he told me. A couple of years back, I was sitting at the bar watching a baseball game and having a pint. just a handful of other people there, and me and this one guy at the bar were engaged in the typical sports conversation. After a couple of hours of the game, this guy felt comfortable enough with me, or just needed to get it out, to tell me about his rape. I didn't really know what to do except just let him get it out. The "it's not your fault" platitude seemed pretty hollow in the situation, but there wasn't much else I could muster. I asked if he was seeking help, and that there are many support groups for men that have been through similar situations. I offered the guy a hug, and he damn near tackled me. I'm a pretty introverted person, so that level of trust from a stranger kind of freaks me out, but I hope I was at least able to help him somewhat, even if it was just to release some of the pressure for a little while. I had a coworker who used to confide in me. She got drunk one time and told me the reason behind her divorce. She found a VHS made with an old-school video camera in which her daughter, 11 years old at the time, was sleeping in her underwear. The video was recorded secretly by her husband and hidden away with other disgusting masturbation material. Dude was perving on his own daughter. This all happened 10 years before I even met my coworker. Charges were never pressed, and to this day, she doesn't know where he is. I don't know if it fits the category, as it's more of a confession than secret, but my mom's coworker told me she wanted to make me a man, and bluntly sex-talked at a party my mother hosted. She was 52, and I was 11 at the time, so I didn't really know what the hell she meant. Thankfully, she didn't act on her desires that night, and I told my mom everything the next day. I don't really know exactly what happened, but they're not acquainted, nor does she work at the same job as my mom anymore. My best friend in high school had a close friend who he knew through Army cadets. I never met her. Pass away in a car accident. He revealed to me, I don't quite know why, that he always felt guilt because there was one time they were at her cottage and these guys basically raped her in front of him and beating him up when he tried to stop it. I don't even remember how I responded at the time. I had an acquaintance admit to me that in a fit of jealous rage, he broke several of his boyfriend's ribs because he caught him making out with someone else. That was the last time we talked. I never saw him again. I genuinely had no idea how to react at the time, and the contact came out of the blue, as we hadn't spoken in months. Before anyone asks why I didn't call the cops, he hadn't told me where he was moving to when he left this town, and we hadn't been good enough friends to really connect, so we just stopped talking. So I couldn't just start calling the cops in random cities about a guy who might or might not be there, and if so, I only had a name and an AIM handle for. We all knew that a friend of mine was from a troubled background, but none of us quite knew the full extent. She didn't speak to her dad or her older brother, and people thought she was a total brat because her dad would occasionally send her huge sums of money, which she'd show zero appreciation for and usually squander. She also had a quite clearly unhealthy relationship with sex, which, when her classmates were young and stupid, led to her being labeled a slut or easy. She had a fairly rough time in school by the sounds of it, but I only met her when we were about 22 or 23. She tried to kill herself one day after a bad breakup. I found her and took her to hospital. It turns out she has horrific BPD most of her life and been in and out of therapy and medication. It stemmed from a traumatic childhood where her older brother used to pimp her out to his friends when she was underage to settle drug bets, etc. She took a knife and tried to kill her brother one time, which led to the breakdown of her family. Her father and older brother cast her out of the family. Her mother took her in but resented her for it. It led to a trigger of abandonment, which explains why she took the breakup so badly, I suppose. What a sad and tragic story. I hope that this person got some therapy or help and is doing better now. Back when I was an anthro student in the field, I met a guy who was a world no expert in something tangential to my research. After a few joints and many beers, our conversation turned from natural disaster of the region to a civil war 20-ish years earlier. He spent a long while talking about what the other side did, just about every combination of rape, incest, and necrophilia that the rebels forced on villagers who they thought were working with the government. From my own research prior to arriving, I had read similar things, so it wasn't that surprising. But the level of detail he went into shocked me. Even worse was when he said that if you talked to one of them, they would say we did the same thing, and they wouldn't be wrong. Probably too late. I'm a psychologist specializing in complex trauma, so I hear effed up shit several times a day. The worst is a lady with HSAM, remember everything that happens to her, who spends one day every week recounting the horrific physical, sexual, and emotional abuse from approximately age 1 till age 16, when she was able to get the F out. It's slow and painful, but she's finally telling her story. I simultaneously love and hate my job. A very close friend of mine had lost her fiancé in a horrible accident while they were in different cities, and she never really got the peace she deserved. They had been together for nearly 6 years. So 2 years later, me, her, and a bunch of our friends were drinking at a friend's place, and she, drunk of course, accidentally blurted out that she had tried to kill herself once. It came as an absolute shock to me because I was living with her since then and I hadn't noticed anything off. We never spoke about it after that, but I still wonder how she went through it alone, and I feel guilty that I wasn't really there for her. One of my friends, who wasn't exactly mentally stable, told me about this entity that had been following him for the past few years. He said that he seemed friendly, but was very overprotective to him. Here's the part where it gets weirder. He starts describing his visions. He described them like literally how you'd think hell was, but worse than you could ever imagine. I asked him the name of said entity, and he wouldn't tell me. I asked why, and he said that everyone he's ever told had committed suicide within a day of hearing his name. I checked some local records and it checked out. Haven't talked to him in a while. I hope he's doing alright. My youngest sister-in-law told me one night when we were both extremely inebriated that her dad had molested both her and her eldest sister for years. She made me promise to never tell my husband or their other sister. He's dead now, so I don't think there's any point in bringing it up as it wouldn't do anything, only cause pain. We're all very close and get along really well. In fact, after their mother passed away, we took her in because their dad was incapable of looking after her, alcoholic. My O called home one day to find her unwashed and she hadn't eaten or gone to school in days. I'm only sorry we didn't act sooner. If only I had known. Mind you, she was 17 at the time, but was obviously suffering from depression. Her sister had no idea that I know about them both, and I've never brought it up again. Their other sister, or my O, has no idea that it was that bad for them. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that he has a favorite daughter that he didn't molest. It's all so effed up. It goes a long way to explain how she ended up making such a mess of her life though, drugs, etc., and the other sister is so successful. My mother told me several years ago about how she opened a letter addressed to my dad. She usually wouldn't open mail, but it was torn and addressed to Dearest Mike. This happened after I was born, but before my brother. I'm fourth of 5. She told me this when my husband and I were thinking about splitting, as a secret. How she confronted my dad, his tears, her inability to leave as she had 4 kids and no income, how she chose to stay and work it out. It just rocked me to the core. Truthfully, as my mom got sick with permanent shingles and declining mental functions, my dad was devoted to her and devoted to caring for her. He passed just this March. Mom's Alzheimer's has progressed far enough that I doubt she remembers him cheating on her or telling me. She can barely remember that he died. I will carry this secret to my grave though. I really want to talk to my siblings and see if they know too. When I was in the Boy Scouts, a guy admitted as to why he was unable to let anyone touch him in a romantic way. He was repeatedly raped in school by an older guy when he was a kid. Also, my own story. In the old apartment building I lived in as a kid, there was this elderly perverted sick F who got obsessed with me. Thing is, he was nice, and his perversion toward me came up gradually, you know? From just talking to actually touching my genital area, but through my pants. I was 12 or so, I didn't fully realize. Anyway, at one point, I did start to realize this was not okay, and made me feel extremely uncomfortable. But I was kinda scared. He's an old, frail man, and defending myself violently would be not okay, because he's an old man and shit. The one time he tried to actually slip his hand in my pants, I kinda let it lash out, and I violently blocked his arm and angrily said, "If you ever come near me again, I'll hit you in the head with this here bicycle lock." It was in the cellar, and I happened to have my big-ass U-shaped bike lock with me. A friend of mine was abused by her ex-boyfriend when she was in 10th grade. He was physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive towards her. He ended up getting caught beating her up in school, and there was a trial, albeit a useless one because he was a minor in Canada. This came up randomly one day when we were talking about Nintendo games, and the friend mentioned she'd once had a Nintendo DS, but her boyfriend broke it, which I thought happened accidentally. It did not. He smashed her over the head with it and tossed it in the garbage. A few years after she confided this information to me, he approached her when we were out for a walk with our group of friends and mocked her when she got visibly uncomfortable. When I put two and two together and figured out who he was, I lost my temper and sucker punched him, knocked him out cold. I am not one to condone violence, but good for you. Hopefully he learned a lesson and stopped that behavior. Had the guy who raped me as a small teenager tell me that he remembered it happened too, although we had both denied anything happening for years because we were both incredibly drunk and he was 7 years older than me, and he had been trying to get with me for a while, and the whole subject made me too uncomfortable. He didn't really consider that it was a non-consensual, and neither did I, but it effed up my entire adult life. He recently tried to apologize and bring things between us to a better place. I appreciate the gesture, but I just ended up apologizing to the person who confused my life for me and made me unable to speak about my first sexual experience, because I can't deal with accepting apologies very well. I guess this belongs here. My best friend, when we were younger, told me he'd been touched by and played house with a girl older than him when he was about 4. She was probably 8. I don't know the extent, but she showed him her genitals and would ask to see his. She'd kiss and touch him. They'd rub each other, or just him, not sure. The bigger secret, though, was he said he did the same thing to younger kids up until he turned 9 or 10 and realized how what he was doing was wrong. Not just that he'd get in trouble, but that he was doing something sick and unhealthy. He said he felt ashamed and stopped. We never talked about it after. He has never done anything that made me even remotely think he might be a predator or dangerous. We're both in our 30s now, and he has kids, and I believe they're totally safe. I just hope he's healed mentally. One roommate ratted on another. I rented a room from a guy who was a quintessential poor little rich boy. He would do just about anything to get people to like him. I knew he was a bit of a social outcast from my friends who knew him before I rented from him. He flaunted his parents' wealth, scoffed at people like me who didn't have money to get the finer things, ditched that old Toyota, man. For me, it's a Beamer or it's nothing. One night, the other roommate came home a little buzzed and started dishing. You know, most of the people he went to high school with won't talk to him, right? No one from that era wants anything to do with him. He used to invite the basketball team over to his house after every game. The last game of his senior year, he had them over and it was wild. His parents got them booze, let the whole team sleep over, and they bounced out of town for the evening. His sister was 16 at the time, and she was good looking. She asked to stay around for the party. Well, the team noticed she was hot, so she starts giving his sister booze to the point where passed out, and he let the team run a train on her. So dude uses his drunk sister as a means to buy what he hopes will be friendship and respect. Word got out, and he became a pariah.